Alright, my name is Mark and I run a Bubble.io agency, and over the past years we've built countless apps for our users, and this means we have built practically any database you can think of. And in this video I'm going to share everything that I know about databases so that you can build your apps in a better way. If you don't apply the tips that I share with you in this video, your app either won't work, it either won't be scalable, or won't perform well. So it's essential that you watch this video and follow every single tip that I say. And even if you think that you know Bubble databases and you're a bit more advanced, I still encourage you to watch the entire video and make sure that you follow everything. I'm going to start with very basics of databases, and I'm going to go into some very advanced and nuanced tips toward the end of the video. Let's start. So first of all, what is a database? A database empowers your app. So first of all, if you can imagine this is your user interface of your application. Now, without the database, if we remove this, it's a basic website. And a website is just containing information about something. But the data on the website never changes from user to user. And that's why we connect a database to this, and database allows us to display a data for every single particular user. So essentially what this means is that now every user sees something different, and he's able to manipulate the data. Think about it as an Excel sheet connected to a pretty user interface. And once you think about this, it becomes much easier to understand databases. Right, let's go. So now let's talk about how the database actually works. A database has things, and everything in the database has attributes. It's better to explain this with an example. Every user that uses an app is a thing as considered per Bubble, and a user has attributes such as an email, his age, or password. And now for another example here is the product. If you have an online store, then every single product of that store is a thing, but there is additional information about every product that we want to store. For example, a price of a product, the color of the product, the name of the product, and those are attributes. It's actually quite simple to decide whether you're talking about a thing or an attribute. Just, is this something like that a user, basically a thing is always something that has an attribute, right? So just think about this way. And it's going to get a bit more intuitive as we get into this video. Now, let's go on to relationships. Sometimes it's necessary to link things together to make something work. And let me give you an example of when this is necessary, a very basic example, and we're going to go into more detailed examples later on. So imagine you're doing a tutoring app, an online classes lab, where users can log in, and all they can do is basically have a class with a tutor, and they're having group classes. And there are multiple cohorts of students, and every cohort has a tutor. Now, rather than just making a field here for every user which is named tutor, we are not doing this. We are actually linking a user to a cohort, and a cohort has a tutor. Why are we doing this? Well, let's say a tutor of a cohort needs to change because a person is sick. Well, in that case, all we do is just change this tutor, and the tutor automatically of every student in that cohort is going to get updated. And that's why we are linking this. Now I'm going to show you how this looks in Bubble.io so that you're not confused. Okay, so to create this in Bubble, we first are going to go and create a cohort. Every cohort is going to have a tutor. And for this sake, we are not going to set the tutor to user. Let's for now keep it as text, because that's going to make it much more easier for you to understand. And then we go back to user, and here we create a new field which is going to be cohort. So a cohort that a user is in, and we're going to link that to a cohort. So now every user has a cohort, and every cohort has a tutor. That way we have just recreated the database that I have been showing you. Okay, let's go back. Next, sometimes we'll need to link a list of something. For example, we have products in our store, and we want to create bundles. A bundle is going to allow a user to buy the product for a much cheaper price. For example, 20% off. The way we would do this is we have the product as I described earlier, and then we will create a separate database thing, which is a bundle, which is going to contain a list of products and a different price for the bundle. So whenever a user purchases a bundle, he's going to get access to all of the products that it links to, because it's a list of products, at the price specified in the bundle. And these are really the only two linkage types that exist in Bubble. Either you link a single thing, or you link a list of things. Okay, now we have that out of the way, we are going to go to a bit more advanced things. First of all, let's prevent some of the dumbest mistakes I see when people create databases. So, first of all, the default creator field in Bubble cannot be changed. If I go back to Bubble, or as you can see on the screenshot, every single data type, if I create something new like test, you'll see a creator is a user. By default, it's built into Bubble. So whoever creates the thing is going to be its creator. Please, please, please do not use that field if you actually need to use a user for that. There are two issues with it. First of all, you cannot change this later on. So if, for example, I would have used, for this example of cohort, a default built-in creator field, and the tutor later on changes, there is no way of modifying it. And the second issue with this, if you're using APIs, then it becomes impossible to modify this. So please do not use it, create a separate user field. Next, set privacy rules when creating your database. Privacy rules are a bit out of the scope of this video, but whenever you create a database in Bubble, always set the privacy rules from the start. Why? Well, privacy rules are a bit tighter to set, and there are more restrictions of how you can set them rather than working with a database, and so you need to make sure that your privacy rules work for your database. I'm going to give you another example on this a bit later on during this video, but just keep this in mind. Another mistake, or another thing you have to keep in mind, is that list of things are slow when they contain over 30 items. Realistically, it's about 100, but as a rule of thumb, if you think your lists are going to contain more than 30 items, then do not use a list. However, lists of things are faster than searches when they contain under 30 items. So, for example, a good example for this is a bundle, right? This bundle is a good application for list of products, because usually a bundle will never contain more than 30 products. So it's faster to use a list here. However, there is an example where this won't work. Let me share this with you. So, example of a dumb design. And I see this in so many tutorials, but really this is just screwing your app up. Why? For example, so you have user has a name, email, and if this is a social media app such as an Instagram, right, you would want to have followers, so people who follow that user. So a user would have a list of followers. But there is a fundamental design flaw with this, and it is that in Instagram, some users have millions of followers. And if you use list with million entries, your app is going to be slow, it's not going to be scalable, and it's going to break. So how do you avoid this? And this is where we come to data types can be used to capture relationships. Before we were talking about data types only as things such as user, product, bundle, so things that you can kind of imagine, right? However, data types can capture relationships as well. And this is very important to understand. So how will we solve this problem with relationships? Think about it for a second. Do you know the answer? Well, the answer is to create a follow thing. A follow thing would have a follower, the person who follows someone, and a followee. And that way, whenever a person clicks on the follow button, a new follow thing gets created. The person who clicked on the button becomes the follower, and the followee becomes the person who the person follows, right? And this way, there is no list of things here that's slowing your app down. And whenever you want to retrieve a relationship, you always retrieve the follow type by using a search. Let's go on. If in doubt, and this is the part where people get confused, usually asking ChatGPT is quite good if you're a beginner. If you're a bit more advanced, I would avoid it. But if you're just starting out with databases, it helps, it works. Don't ask it particularly about the Bubble.io databases, just ask it generally about the database. It's going to give you quite a good answer. Okay, now let's dive into a deeper example and try to build a database from scratch by following all of the rules that I mentioned before for a more complicated example. In our example, we're building an educational platform where users can buy courses and watch courses online. A course contains a text lessons. A user can mark lessons of a course as completed. They can also get a free trial of a course. So let's start. First of all, we have a user. what do we need next? We need a course that contains text lessons. Okay, so let's create a course. And a course would contain lessons. Now, here it's crucial to think. Will our course contain, on average, over 30 lessons? The answer for this case, let's say no. So we can actually just put a list of lessons. And what is a lesson? Well, text lessons. And for this, let's create another data type so every lesson can be edited separately. Lesson, and a lesson is going to have lesson text. This is useful when, why are we creating this and not just putting it like a list of text into the course? Reason for that, if we want to then give a video to each lesson, we can simply edit over here. So it becomes much easier to modify our app later on. Okay, so if you draw some arrows here, let me copy our arrow from here. So if you put this arrow, so this lesson basically links to this course over here. Now, let's continue. A user, okay, so now users can buy courses. So we have to somehow distinguish which courses the user has bought and which courses he has access to. So first of all, let's think about it again. Will a user buy more than 100 courses? Well, it's very unlikely that someone will buy more than 100 courses or more than 30 courses. So we can safely say a list of courses is bought. Okay, this is cool. So whenever a user buys a course is added to his list of courses. Basically, these are the courses that the user has access to. But we're missing something. A user can mark lessons of a course as completed. There is no way of now doing this if we have this design. The reason why is because marking a lesson complete is something about the relationship between a user and a course. We cannot modify the course, and we cannot put a list. Like, let me explain this. So, for example, we could do this list. We can do a list of users who marked this lesson as complete. But there can be thousands of users that are on the platform. So this list is going to blow up and it's going to slow your app down. So this is not an option. It's not an option to put it somewhere here because this is just a list of lessons. So the way you would do this, and there's no way of putting it on the user. We could, in theory, do a list of lessons that the user has marked as complete. But an issue with this is that if the user, let's say a course contains 30 lessons, user buys like 5 courses. 30 times 5 is enough to start slowing your app down because, well, that's like 150 lessons completed. So that's already blowing up your list. So there is no way to capture this relationship by just adding a list. So we have to create a new data type that's going to capture information about the relationship between a course and a user. Okay, I hope this makes sense so far. So this is going to be called course membership. And so we are going to now remove this because we don't need this. And now, whenever a user is going to buy a course, every course membership is going to have a user who bought the course, and it's going to be the course that the user has bought, and it's going to contain a list of lessons that are completed. And since a course can only have like 30 lessons, this list will never blow up, and it will capture the relationship. And now, instead of having the list of courses here, we're realistically only having course memberships of this user. Now, a question is, do we want to save a list of course memberships for this particular user or not? In this case, not really necessary for the app, right? So let's keep it up. So this now links to the user, so we can always find the users of it. This now links to the course, right? So this links to the course, and it links to lessons that the user has completed, in that particular course. Finally, another thing that we have missed is privacy rules. And I'm not going to go in depth into this, and if you know privacy rules already, the way you would do this is you would still add a list of courses here to make sure which courses the user has access to. This is a bit beyond the scope of this video. If you're still curious about this, ask a comment. I'm gonna answer it or make another video about this. But in a nutshell, this is everything. No, actually not. They can also get a free trial of the course. So maybe a trial is like again, information about the relationship. So here we can make something like this: is trial ? And this is going to be a yes no data type, so yes or no. And if it is a trial, for example, then a user won't have access to all of the lessons of the course. And if it's not a trial, then he will have all the lessons of a course available to him. Now, if we go through this example step by step, user buys a course, he gets added, a course membership gets created with his user, the course he bought, and list of lessons. Whenever he completes a lesson gets added to this list of lessons, and then this is visible inside of the app. And the trial is there to signify whether it's a trial or a full course. There we go. Okay, now it gets even more complicated from here, but I'm going to try to make it understandable for everyone. Static versus dynamic data. Now, so far we have been only talking about dynamic data. This is data that can be modified throughout the application. Static data is the data that is, you can think of it as hard-coded into the app, a data that's never going to be modified or rarely going to be modified, and it can only be modified by you, the admin user. Users in the app cannot modify it. And a good example for that is, and it's basically option sets. So if you go into Bubble Editor and go here, this is where you store your static data. When do you use static data? A good example for that is, let's say you have a course again, and you want to sort courses by buckets. For example, beginner course, intermediate, and advanced. This beginner, intermediate, and advanced is a great example of static data. So this, in our case, would be a static data with the name, which is beginner, intermediate, advanced, and the course would link to this data. And the reason why we're doing this is because fundamentally you're never going to add another difficulty, or no user is going to add another difficulty level. You can maybe then later add expert, but this is only editable through the Bubble Editor. So fundamentally, nothing's going to get added to the course. There will only be beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And this is when you make static data. Finally, let's go into some advanced optimizations of databases. So a course has a review, and review has the course. So basically it links back to the course which is left. Again, making a list of reviews here is bad because a course can have thousands of reviews. Very bad. So let's link the review to the course. Now, a review has a rating from, let's say, 1 to 5, and the review text itself. Now, it's important. When we display courses like this for purchase on our, let's say, our product page, we want to put a small review over here, so how many stars each of the courses has got. But with the current database, this is going to become a problem. Because first of all, we're searching for all the courses. Then for every single course, we'll have to find all of its reviews and then calculate the average of those reviews. This is going to break your app, it's going to make it super slow, and it's going to consume a lot of workload. And this is where you optimize things that can be written on the course. Here, you would add something like average review of every course. And whenever this thing is going to get loaded, just the average review, you're just going to access the average review of the course. And that way, you don't have to do a search for every single review when you load these things. Okay? And the way you calculate this average review, well, one way to do it is whenever a person leaves a new review, you can simply do a search for all reviews and calculate the average. A more optimized way that we have implemented for our clients is by using this formula. It's called incremental averaging. It's very specific for that particular use case. I'm not going to go in depth into it. But what it does is basically whenever a person leaves a review, instead of doing a search for every single review, you just basically take the current average and the total number of reviews left, and you kind of increment the average by just doing this formula, and this way you don't have to do a search for it. But basically, what you should think about is if I'm going to be accessing some sort of data or relationship often or in such manner like this, when I'm displaying entities and then I have to do a search for every entity, then it might be worth creating a separate attribute for that. All right, finally, another tip is to think about data type twice. Instead of saying sign up completed as yes, no, so if a user finishes his sign up process in the application and you just simply say, okay, this guy has completed it, this guy has not, maybe save it as date sign up completed as date. So it's always going to be empty when the user has not completed the sign up, but when he completes the sign up, there is a clear date and time when he has done it. These small things are super easy to miss in the beginning, but once you start playing with your app's analytics, these things might come in handy. So just really think how you build your database. And finally, a small bonus tip. I think many of you know it, but whenever you call a thing in database, never put an S behind it, because there are instances when Bubble takes, and for example, when you then, I'm going to demonstrate this. So for example, let's create a new data tab, which is called, for example, here we create test. If I would have called it tests, and now I would go to, user, and I want to add a list of tests. You go here, tests, this field is the list. You see it's a list of test S, because Bubble basically adds another S here. So whenever you save a thing in database, basically never add an S in the beginning, in the end, sorry. And here, this way, a list of tests. This is properly done. I think having watched this video, you should really know everything you need about the databases and all the concepts. It would be still useful if you go into the editor now and try to play with all these concepts and see how they work for you. See you in the next one.